Welcome to the NFP Podcast, where we explore the empowering world of natural family planning. I'm Amy Smith. Join me and my co-host Emily Appledorn each week. Together, we're here to dive deep into the science, the stories, and the spirituality behind NFP. Every week, we push back against the free love culture and advocate for a culture of responsible love, where intentionality and respect are at the forefront of family planning. Join us as we discuss everything from the practicalities of charting and fertility awareness to the profound impact NFP can have on relationships and communities. Whether you're new to NFP or a seasoned pro, our podcast is your go-to resource for honest conversations, expert insights, and real-life experiences. So grab a friend, settle in, and get ready to be inspired. This is the NFP Podcast. All right, everybody. Welcome back to the podcast. Emily can't be with us today. She's celebrating her mom's birthday, but I'm really excited to have a conversation today with my good friend. Just for full disclosure, I consider her a big role model for me. Her and her husband kind of mentored us when we were engaged, and then her oldest daughter is my oldest son's godmother. So I'm a big fan of Debbie, so I'm already biased before we even start our conversation. But today we have with us Dr. Debra Gramlich. She's going to introduce herself, and then we'll get into a little conversation. She's a family medicine doctor, so we're going to kind of do both a professional and personal foray into Debbie's experience with natural family planning and the Catholic Church's teaching on human sexuality, as well as a specific method of NFP, the Creighton Model Fertility Care System. So welcome, Debbie, to the podcast.
Great. Thank you very much, Amy.
Yes, I'm so excited to have you.
So that was a great introduction. That's exactly right. I'm Debbie Gramlich. I live in Florida and have been married, I think, 27 years. It's been 27 years. I've been married for 27 years now, and a cradle Catholic, and got married. Met my husband in college, and then we got married just before I started residency. So we dated during medical school for almost 5 years, actually, and finally
at the University of Florida, right?
Mm-hmm, at the University of Florida, and then we got married, and I went to residency, and we now have seven children. And one is grown and out of the house, and 2 are in college, and the other 4 are still home. So anyway, so that's my kind of my short bio.
And you practiced in like a private practice for a little while, right? Before you started doing...
So my story is I'm
trying to think, where should we start first, Debbie? What sounds more natural? Like
I probably
your personal story or professional?
Yeah, chronically. Probably personal, I think, is a little easier. I mean, I did the standard normal, went to college, went to medical school, went to residency in family medicine, and then I started a practice in Tampa, St. Petersburg. I was there for about 7 years, and then decided to take a break for a little while, and then we founded the St. Gianna Center, and I did that nonprofit work just until recently. And I'm still involved with the St. Gianna Center, but I'm now doing mostly my medical work through telehealth, which is my Catholic doctor, which is a company that was founded in 2018. And I joined in 2022. So that's kind of my professional timeline. But personally, I guess it's, I was raised cradle Catholic. My mom was a convert. My parents had just a really close-knit family growing up, with a lot of extended family around. So it was really a lot of fun, just a beautiful upbringing, a lot of happiness and a lot of good times. And we went to weekly mass. I had a strong faith in the sense that my family, my parents were committed to going to mass every week. And so I did learn the faith. I learned the basics of, just the love that God had for me, and that every life is sacred, and love for others. I learned all those, principles. But the details of the catechesis, I don't think I didn't learn a lot of specifics, like about contraception or I knew the basic general principles, the 10 Commandments, and, that in the sacredness of marriage. And I knew, I had been raised in that way. So going into college, I remained active in my faith. I was an active member of the Newman Club at the University of Florida. Really loved my faith. And I was there that I met my husband. So we would have a potluck dinner actually once a week at the Newman Club Center and at the St. Augustine Church there in Gainesville. And we would once a week, we'd meet. And that's where I met my husband, was at one of those potluck dinners. So anyway, we started dating, and I was headed to medical school, I believe. I'm trying to remember now. It's going back a long ways. So he was we graduated. Yeah. So we dated at least, I think, my junior year of college. And I was in the junior honors medical program, which meant that I started my first year of medical school was my last year of undergrad. It was a combined year. And so we graduated at the end of that year. He graduated with his degree in engineering, and I graduated with my undergraduate degree. And then I stayed at Florida for another 3 years, and he went to back home where he grew up, which was in the St. Petersburg area, and he started working down there. So we probably dated like in person, like this is before we did have cell phones, but they were very primitive. And I just remember, we were dating long distance for 3 years. So we had to pay for every minute of phone conversation.
Oh, yes.
Wrote a lot of letters back and forth. So it was good though. It was a, beautiful courtship, and eventually he proposed, and we got ready to get married.
How did he ask you to marry him?
Well, we were on vacation. Actually, I was with my parents on vacation up in Tennessee, and he came up after Christmas to just be with us. And typical with my family gatherings, there's never a quiet moment anywhere. And so he couldn't find a time away from everyone else to propose. Oh. And he kept trying, but I kept saying, no, I want to do, I didn't want to leave my family. Anyway, so eventually on our way, we were going to travel home at the end of that trip. We were going to travel home together to see his parents for New Year's. And so he had to literally pull over on the side of the road and propose to me.
Debbie, no way.
Finally, because he had me by myself, said, and I had been a little upset that morning because he left really early, like earlier than I thought we should have to leave. So I was already a little mad. And anyway, so not the best, but he persisted, and I said yes. And we're very happy after that. That's our little engagement story. But so on our way we went, and we got, and that was, we were engaged for actually a long engagement. It was 18 months because I still had to finish school, and I didn't want to, we were in 2 different locations, and it just made sense to wait until I was done with medical school to get married. But in that marriage prep process, we did talk about about contraception. And actually going back a few years, when I was in medical school, I was diagnosed with polycystic ovaries, and I had some irregular cycles and abnormal hair growth and just various things. And so I had gone to the doctor because I was in medical school, and I'm like, oh, I think this is what I have. So, I went to the doctor, and they had put me on the birth control pill. So I was already taking the birth control pill. And then actually one of my friends, one of my classmates in medical school, she was a evangelical Protestant, very serious about her Christian faith. And she knew I was serious about my Catholic faith. And she was asking about birth control. And I remember kind of thinking, well, it's okay to take it, if you have a medical reason that you need to take birth control pills. And I kind of brushed it aside. I didn't really go into it very deep with her, probably because I hadn't really looked at it myself. I didn't really understand the issue too well myself. Mm-hmm. But then here I am preparing for marriage just a couple of years later. And we were talking about birth control. And I still remember the conversation because we actually were sitting by a lake over by I think it's Northwest. Anyway, I don't remember the hospital's name, but I remember where we were sitting at the lake, and my husband had brought out the catechism, and we were actually looking at the catechism and reading what it had to say about contraception. And it was clear from reading it that it really isn't okay to take birth control. The church doesn't, it's sinful to take birth control. Fertility is a gift. And so I remember reading that, and I was like, it was really challenging because I was taking the birth control pill, and I really was fearful about getting pregnant in residency, because right after we got married, I'm literally a week later, I'd be starting my residency, and I was concerned about, getting pregnant right away, and my derailing my training, which I'd already been in for so long. And I was thinking, gosh, I don't think I want to do that. Right. And I didn't know much about natural family planning, but what I had heard is that it wasn't very effective, and for avoiding pregnancy anyway. And so I wasn't really open to that. And my husband, my fiance at the time, Gregor, he just was like, well, whatever you think is best. I mean, he wasn't really arguing about it either way. I knew, because I was the medical person, so he didn't really want to question what I was saying. And I think really in my heart, I knew I kind of had to pass, because I was already on the pill for a medical reason, and I could probably just keep taking it and it would be considered okay, so I didn't really challenge it. And I didn't really go much further than that one conversation and, looking at it. So we went on and got married, and then about a year.
And stayed on the pill. Is that right?
I stayed on the pill. Yeah.
Stayed on the pill, yep.
So we moved to Orlando, because that's where I matched for my residency program. And so Gregor found a job in Orlando. We moved there for my residency. And while we were there, we had a parish. We were active at St. Margaret Mary Parish in Winter Park. And they had a couple of things. They had a rosary group that I started going to on my way home from work. And this was like once a week. So sometimes I would get there, sometimes I wouldn't. Resident schedule's a little bit unpredictable. But I really enjoyed, they were mostly older ladies, but I just really loved going and saying the rosary with them. And the other thing is we signed up for nocturnal adoration, my husband and I, once a month on First Friday. And I don't know that we really even totally understood what the real presence was. I mean, I was Catholic, but I hadn't really internalized that Jesus was really present, I think, totally. So when we signed up for the adoration, I knew we were going to go and we were going to be in the Lord's presence. But we, sometimes because, my schedule was a little crazy, and because I was on call, a lot, and sometimes I'm very tired. And so sometimes we would just flat out forget and we wouldn't go. And we had signed up for the 1 a.m. shift. So whichever poor soul had this shift before me, if I didn't show up, they had a 2-hour shift. They had that 2-hour time with the Lord, which must have been fruitful, because we would get there most of the time, and I would be very sleepy sometimes, but we would go. But I just mentioned this because it still bore a lot of fruit, because by the end of that year, or maybe even less than a year, our first year of marriage, I really didn't want to take the pill anymore, and I stopped taking it. And I didn't really know why, but I just didn't want to take it anymore. And I had kind of accepted it. It helped a little bit because I was already into my residency, was feeling a little more comfortable with what I was doing. And there were also some ladies in my class that were considering getting pregnant, and I was like, wow, they're actually open to getting pregnant during training. And so then I wasn't as fearful. And I think between that plus the combination of all the grace that I'm sure I received from, the adoration, the prayers of the people praying there, every First Friday, and then the Rosary group. I just think a lot of it had to do with, how I became uncomfortable with taking the pill. But it wasn't really because I was thinking about how bad contraception was. It was just more of I think of maybe a progress in my prayer life that it couldn't really explain to anybody. I stopped taking the pill. but we did not get pregnant. And so my third year of residency I was in the middle of my third year of residency, and starting to get a little worried because I had not conceived. And I was thinking, maybe something's wrong.
Had your cycles come back, Debbie, after getting off of the
Yeah,
pill?
I was regular cycles, and I had polycystic ovaries, or had been diagnosed with it, but I didn't have like super long irregular cycles. I did at times, but not always. And so I started tracking like my temperature, and I could tell that my temperature would go up. And so I knew I was ovulating. I just still didn't understand anything about like cervical mucus, or the fact that, once your temperature goes up, you're not fertile really anymore. But I was at least defining that. So I did not learn a huge amount about natural family planning, specifically in residency or medical school. So, but I had some knowledge of, the different things that would happen throughout the fertility cycle.
How about during your marriage prep time, Debbie? How about during marriage prep with Gregor? Did you guys ever have that? Other than your conversation with the catechism, did it ever come up?
We had a marriage prep through St. Augustine's in Gainesville. They did it. And we also, the priest, we had 2 priests that celebrated our wedding with us, that celebrated the wedding and witnessed our marriage for us. And we had conversations with both of them, not specifically about natural family planning that I can remember. I mean, it may have happened, but I just don't remember.
Gotcha.
And then we had a marriage couple, a mentor couple. And I think we had actually many years later, I came across my marriage prep materials, and in the folder, I found something about NFP, a flyer about it, but I don't remember ever looking at it. So it was in there, but I just didn't see it. But anyway, so I'm trying to remember where I was. Okay. So I got to my third year of residency and had not gotten pregnant. I was at this point, at first we weren't really focused on getting pregnant, but the last year I was more focused on getting pregnant, because I was thinking, well, it'd be nice to have a baby before I start my practice. And anyway, but it didn't happen. And we had tried for a good year, and I was starting. So that led to kind of a heart-to-heart conversation with God. I do remember being on my knees by my bed and kind of praying about that reality that, I thought that I just remember talking to God about how, how fearful I had been about pregnancy, and now I want to be pregnant and I'm not pregnant. And I just realized how all over the place I had been, and that I was thinking that this fertility was mine to control, and that it really wasn't. I wasn't in control of this. This is not something that I had any control over at all. And because God is really the giver of life. And so on my knees, I remember praying and just, being very contrite about that reality, that I, had not been more humble, and realizing how much God is in control, not me, and that we depend on him, and that, who was I to think that I could even control this? So it was a real deepening of my prayer. And I also remember praying and thinking, well, when I accept it, I actually told the Lord, accept it. If it's your will that I'm, that I'm not to conceive, then maybe that's why you called me to be a doctor, right? And then I was thinking about that, like, maybe that's why God sent me down this path to become a physician, is maybe because I have infertility, and maybe I don't have, the ability to have children. And maybe that's going to be the fruit that I have is this work that I have. So anyway, it was a kind of a deepening of my prayer. And I just told him. But then at the end, I remember saying, and if I do get pregnant, I promise I will take that NFP class. Kind of like a bargaining chip, right? So it's like, yeah, I promise I will do it. And anyway, a few months went by, and I was actually in my most difficult rotation. It was a lot of call, and it was a really hard rotation in my I think it was like February of my third year. So I was going to graduate that June, and I had made an appointment to talk to the doctor about the infertility. So when I showed up for the appointment at the gynecologist, they ran a pregnancy test and it was positive.
Oh my gosh, Debbie. Wow.
So I was pregnant with Lauren, my first. And so of course I didn't need the infertility evaluation. And I'm so glad I didn't go through that, because I didn't really have the formation. I mean, I was not really thinking about what that would all involve. So anyway, I was kind of spared that, and I appreciate, I'm very grateful I was. But anyway, so I got pregnant, and graduated from residency, and we moved over to the Tampa area, St. Petersburg, and I ended up starting, a new practice with another Catholic physician, and then I had my baby in November, and that was Lauren, our first child. So she was born, and I was nursing and breastfeeding, so I didn't have cycles for a while. And then after she was born, it wasn't right away, but a few months went by, and I was thinking about, my fertility coming back. And I was thinking, well, I remembered my prayer and what I had told the Lord about, I'll take that NFP class. I promise I will. And so I thought, I have to do that. So I called the diocese and I talked to Sharon Eiler, who was at the time in the Respect Life office for the Diocese of St. Petersburg. And I told her, I didn't actually tell her, I just told her I was a lady and married and I wanted to learn about NFP, and I just had a baby. And so she gave me the name of a teacher, and my husband and I set up an appointment with a Creighton model teacher. And we started we had the introductory session, and then we did all the sessions with her. And it was really a wonderful time for us as a couple. And for me personally, I just couldn't believe how much I learned about my body and about my fertility, things that as a practicing physician, you'd think I would know, but I really didn't. So it was really just an amazing year of learning those, going through all those follow-ups. I was breastfeeding. I wasn't in regular cycle. So, but even so, because it's a little more challenging, I think, to learn NFP when you don't have that regular feedback of your cycle starting to confirm, oh yeah, I did identify that fertility window correctly. But my cycles did eventually come back, and then that confidence improved. But even so, it was just really a wonderful time. The two of us would go to the sessions, and she would, lovingly talk us through all the different things. And I think I had been a little bit afraid that my husband would not be open to this, but he was amazingly very open to it and really embraced this as really, what was best for us and also best for me. And that just his willingness to come to the sessions and to do the charting actually for me, really showed me how much he loved me like Christ would love, as Christ loves the church in that sacrificial way. My husband was loving me in that sacrificial way. And I really, it really showed me his love. So I was very affirmed by the whole process, and started charting, and just really was just amazed, honestly, when my cycles came back. And for the first time in my life, I could actually predict when my period was going to start. And it was really just phenomenal. And so I loved it from the very beginning. And so
now, were you back at work yet?
Yeah, I always went back fairly quickly because I was in my own practice.
Right.
And couldn't be gone very long. So sometimes I bring the babies with me until they were mobile. They would stay at my house. So then a few years, I think it was it was 2002. My daughter was born in 2000. And then around 2002, might have been 2003. It was 2003. We had a group of Catholic physicians and a Catholic Medical Association, and we just had a little group of us. I was working out of a Catholic hospital, St. Anthony's. And so, there were many Catholic physicians, my partner, and also the doctor across the hall from me. And they were having a gathering, and then we were meeting we were going to actually go to a baseball game, a professional baseball game together, and have a meal. And so we did that. So we were all at this baseball game, and I met Maura Butte, who's a Catholic physician in St. Petersburg. And so we were having a conversation, and we were in the little baseball game. We were talking about of all things, natural family planning. And it turned out that she was going through, sort of a conversion on the issue just at the same time I was. And so we were really talking about how wonderful this was. And I was telling her about my experience with the Creighton model. I just couldn't believe how amazing it was as far as being able for me to be able to identify the fertile window properly, and just how much it was teaching me about my body. And I was really enthusiastic about it. And then she looked at me and she goes, well, do you prescribe birth control? And I mean, literally, it stopped me in my tracks. I didn't know what to say. And because I really had never, until that point, thought about what I was doing in my practice compared to, what I was doing in my personal life. And didn't really ever think about it. I mean, I always had thought, well, I mean, I don't do abortions. I never, I knew that was kind of like a black and white line in the sand. Like, I knew life was sacred. I would never participate in abortion. That was nothing I'd ever do. But contraception was grayer for me because I felt like, well, I'm Catholic, but I can't really ask my patients to do all the things that I would do. So if they need, they want a contracept, I'm going to prescribe the contraceptive. And that's kind of, didn't really think more about it. So when she asked me that question, I wasn't sure what to say. And I was also a little bit taken aback and almost a little bit angry, because I was like, how could she ask me that in the middle of a baseball game? And I was kind of on the spot. I didn't know what to say. And so I kind of said, well, and I kind of gave her the same answer I gave my evangelical friend back when I was in medical school, that, I have to prescribe because I don't want to impose my beliefs on my patients. It's kind of how I said, it's kind of what I said, and that changed the subject. Mm-hmm. So anyway, after that experience, with my friend in medical school, I didn't ever think about it again. But this time it got under my skin, and I started thinking about it, and I started praying about it, and I just couldn't stop thinking about it. And I guess it was the Holy Spirit or my conscience. It really bothered me. Like, is what I'm doing really okay? Mm-hmm. And so I started, and I thought, well, I got to figure this out. I can't just it bothered me enough. I knew I had to research this a little bit more. So I went in, I started reading everything I could find. First, about the Catholic Church's position on contraception and where it came from and what do we really believe. And so I read Humana Vitae, which I had never heard of before. I read that, and that was challenging. I was like, wow, this is a very solid document, and it's very beautiful. And then I read some other things, and to be honest, I don't remember exactly what I read because it was 20 something years ago, but I spent 3 months reading and researching everything I could find about what the church had to say about contraception and trying to look at it from all the different angles. And then I also looked at the science of natural family planning, and I looked into, what is that? And, how long has that been taught? And, I looked at all of those things. And at the end of the 3 months, I went into it thinking I was going to prove to my friend that I was actually the correct person, correct in saying that I can't I should be prescribing contraception, even though I'm not using it in my personal life. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the 3 months, I was writing her a thank you note saying, thank you so much, because you're absolutely right. And I'm going to, thank you, because this is going to help my soul, by going through this whole process of discernment. And then because I realized at the end of those 3 months of prayer, did a lot of adoration and reading, that I really could not continue to prescribe birth control, because I saw the harm that it has done to society and that it can do to each individual woman and to each individual married couple. And I said, I can't do that. I have to, in good conscience, I have to only promote and recommend to patients the things that I truly think are good for them. And I could clearly see after I did this research that this is not good for people to be taking these medicines and doing these things. So I wrote a letter to my patients, and it was the feast. I mailed it on the Feast of the Immaculate Conception, and that was in 2003. And I just told them I was no longer going to be able to prescribe birth control as of a certain date. I think I picked a date like 3 months later. I had to give legally, I really felt like, and morally, I felt like the right thing to do is to give them some notice, because they would likely have to find another doctor. And so I sent my letter, and that was it. I haven't prescribed birth control since then. So, and haven't needed to. I was originally a little bit afraid that I wouldn't know what to do, because I had a fair bit of I was female family physician. So, I did a fair bit of women's health. And I wasn't sure really how I was going to manage certain things, because usually you can, would use the birth control pill if you had to manage abnormal bleeding or, different situations that would come up. But I was shortly around that time that I was deciding not to prescribe, I learned about the education program that the St. Pope Paul VI Institute has for physicians to help them. If they do not want to prescribe birth control, you can learn how to manage pretty much any kind of reproductive issue that will come up. You can manage it without prescribing the birth control pill, but I had to go through some extra training to do that. So I decided to do that course, and that helped tremendously in being able to have something to offer to patients if they did not want to take birth control, that there was something else that they could do. Number one, if they had any kind of medical issues, that would properly manage them fine. And then if they did not want birth control, then to have that ability to refer them to a natural family planning teacher if they wanted to learn about their fertility.
Now, what was the conversation with Gregor like as you were going through this and learning all this and deciding professionally, obviously, because, what you were doing professionally could impact your family. And then, were there any repercussions professionally from that, from other doctors, from any of your patients? And again, familially, like how that worked in your marriage?
Well, my husband was always supportive.
Was he learning kind of along with you?
He was learning along with me. Yes. We eventually signed up, and that was actually after I went through this conversion process. The learning continued, actually, because it was like my faith all of a sudden just like exploded, and I wanted to learn about everything. So I ended up learning about, theology of the body. We were taking theology of the body courses and doing all kinds of things, in the years after that point. But during that time when I was going through that discernment, no, he was really supportive. He doesn't usually give me a lot of advice, like to do this or to do that. He just kind of listens. But that's what I needed at the time. Professionally, it was fine. My medical partner, Dr. Tom Robison, he and his wife, Sharon, they're wonderful friends of mine, and they've always been very supportive, because this was not only going to impact me, it was going to impact the practice. And, but he was very supportive, and I've always appreciated that support. And my patients, for the most part, many of them, didn't, had to find another doctor. They didn't want to stop taking birth control, so they had to find someone else to prescribe that for them. But I also received many new patients that came to me because of it, because they wanted a doctor who didn't prescribe birth control. So it kind of balanced out. I did get a call from a TV station shortly after my letter went out, and they wanted to interview me with a physician, a gynecologist from University of South Florida. And I just wasn't ready for that. Mm-hmm. I had just gone through that whole conversion. I was not ready to be on TV, discussing it. So I declined the interview. But, so yeah, there were some challenges, at times, but it really, God's grace was there, through it all. It was, and I was so much at peace. Like when I finally went through all that, I made that decision. It was like this huge weight was gone, and there was just a lot of peace. And I knew that I was doing what God wanted, what I was moving the direction that God wanted me to move. So And that's what happens, and this is just the beginning, right? Our whole lives are a journey of conversion. And so this was just one moment in my life. There've been many more since then where you feel, you get restless and it's the Holy Spirit kind of stirring you. You go through some prayer and you realize you got to move in a different direction. And so that's God, and that's how he works in our lives. And it was, but very beautiful time. We had a lot of graces that happened, and a lot of blossoming of my faith. Because I think what my husband and I realized through it all, and then just seeing how NFP was blessing our marriage, was that, gosh, if the church is right about this thing that is so intimate and personal to a woman, right? Her fertility. And and we could clearly see the truth after living it together. We've done this now for 20 something years. We see how beautiful this plan is. And it's something that it's really too beautiful to even describe. But it's so true. And so it has to be true. And so if it is true, I mean, we were living it and we see the truth in it. And so we know that, gosh, if the Catholic Church can be right about this, they've got to be right about everything that has to do with our faith. And so it just increases my faith increased, my faith in learning about the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, and just so many things. And also just looking at the example of the Blessed Mother and her humility and her purity and her receptivity. And so these things just over and over and over again, I find, having lived married life with children, I can see so tangibly the faith in so many ways. So anyway, I think that's probably the biggest, hugest benefit of the whole thing.
I agree. I feel like one aspect of the church's teaching on chastity in different seasons of life, and especially in married life, is how interconnected all other aspects of our faith become when that is properly understood, because in married life, right, we're in that sacramental union, like we're participating in a sacrament, a living sacrament, right, every day of our life, that like everything else about our faith, the Holy Family, the seasons of the liturgical seasons of the church, and the wisdom of a mother church, and God the Father. It's just, it becomes even more real. I feel like even if you're not consciously living that every day, like, oh, I'm in this sacramental union and we're living, it's crazy. It's really loud and there's a lot of people running around, that's kind of the daily life. But when you can get the opportunity or the grace to step back from that and to remember what it is I'm participating in, it's just, to sound somewhat cliche, right? It's like the big circle of life, or the big interconnection of the divine and our humanity. Like, and then it makes the mass more real, right, Debbie? Like the mingling of the wine and the water, and that Christ took on our humanity, and in order to bring us to his divinity. Like, it's just amazing, it gets you. Yeah. So I can see that, Debbie, how like this learning of this profound truth about our body, about our fertility, which is one of our greatest gifts as being made in the image and likeness of God, that we too can participate in life, in giving life to another person. That's, God is the ultimate life giver, and he brings us into that act. I mean, it is, to your words, like it's so humbling. It's so humbling to remember in whose image we're made, and with whom we get to participate in this process. It's
yes.
Yeah, a huge blessing. And then for you, even more so in your role as a medical professional, and being a doctor, and being in that role of healer and caretaker, and walking with people in their journeys in different points in time to achieve a pregnancy, avoid a pregnancy, or whatever other health ailment they might find. So I would love for you to talk a little bit, Debbie, if you feel comfortable too, with, we've got about like 10 minutes left. I remember, Joey and I both remember, I forget how many kids you had when we met you. Did you have, I know John Paul, I think, was 2 or 3. He was potty training. I remember he was potty training.
I think Michael
we had that classic.
Yeah.
Were you pregnant with Michael?
Well, he was at your wedding and he was an infant, I think, because I have a picture. Yeah.
So I think you weren't quite pregnant with Michael yet. And I think you
Okay.
got pregnant with Michael, and then you had him, and then you guys, you came to our wedding because he was just he was just a baby at our wedding, wasn't he?
Yes.
Okay. So anyway, I think I remember us coming over to your house for dinner once, and maybe you had told us that you were pregnant again, and it must have been with Michael Timothy. And I don't know if Joey asked you or I asked you guys, how do you discern when you're ready to be open to try another baby? And I think Gregor made a joke. He's like, well, I started running again. and the why he said that, for those of you who don't understand the joke, but why he said that was because he was like, we got into a flow where we had time and space and some peace, and it was like, okay, we could see another, and so much so that I could start running again in the morning. And we started to think like, okay, now we could have another person now, like we could welcome another person in right now. And it just sounded like such a simple discernment. And it kind of sounded a little bit of what I heard from your story, which is it's this gentle prompting of the Holy Spirit, and kind of giving you that opportunity to think, well, maybe right after you have a baby, you're like, oh my gosh, I could not have another baby right now, which I think is a totally normal response. Like, you just had a baby, you're nursing, you're not sleeping. The idea of having another baby, you're right, that doesn't sound sane or appealing at the moment. But then you're 2-3 years out, baby's, sleeping through the night, most likely right at that point. You're not nursing anymore. You're sleeping better. Things are in a groove. The child's talking, heading towards potty training. I mean, because that's just, I'm saying that because that's like where we're at with the twins right now. And it's just so like, oh, you could totally have another baby. Like, they're able to put their shoes on themselves, somewhat buckle themselves in the car, and it just, even before that, if we were interested in having another baby, before you got to that point, I feel like once you get to that point, for sure, you're like, okay, we could handle another one. So I would just love for you, if you, again, feel comfortable, to share a little bit about kind of how you guys have discerned over the years, and then when you were like, okay, I think our family is complete here. We have, 7 beautiful children, and we're done. And before I let you answer, I just want to close that last comment out with, I think that scares a lot of devout Catholics to say something like, I feel like our family is good, is complete, however you want to word it. Because I think there's some fear of, do I even have the right to say that? Like, can I even say something like that? Is that not okay to say, I'm comfortable with the number of children we have and I don't want to have any more? So I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, so it's interesting because I think when you're young, and at least this is how it worked in my marriage, the first 2 or 3 children, they come and they're there and you're happy. You get pregnant and you're happy about it. And I didn't really discern too much about it, actually. But the older you get and the more children you have, I think we discerned a little more because you're just stretched more. You have more things going on and things are busier. And so, in fact, I know with my last, Gregor would say, yeah, because I'm running, because that means he's sleeping. So if he's having enough sleep and he can get up and run, then that means sleep is important to my husband. So as we got, and it also depends on what's going on in the home. Because I know at one point we had, I think when I was with my last 3, I can honestly say, I was expecting to be pregnant, but when I saw the pregnancy test positive, I almost had a panic attack. Like, you're going to be pregnant, but you look and it's really positive and you're like, and you just, not that it was unexpected, it wasn't, but you just, you realize the enormity of what's coming.
Right.
Whereas I didn't have that with my first 1 or 2. But when I was on number 5 or 6, that's what was happening. When I'd see the positive test, I'd be like, oh, we would be happy about it, but I was more panicked about it because I was thinking, gosh, you start to fear more, I think. I say that, but then it's interesting because when I got into my 40s, when a lot of women are probably the most fearful of getting pregnant or, really contemplating, sterilization because I feel like their family size is complete. I kind of had the opposite, actually. we sort of became more open to life, and we're not, I really was not as worried. After my 7th was born, I was 45. I mean, I also physically, I know that your fertility just declines naturally quite a bit in your 40s. And especially after age, 44, 45, it really declines. Not to say that it's impossible to conceive, but it's less likely. And I can see on my chart the fertility signs were waning, and, things were not, things change. But I found myself, and part of it is just, I'm menopausal now. So, but as you go through that process of your fertility declining, there's kind of a grieving that happens, and it's a normal thing because you're aging and you're just kind of recognizing what's happening. But it really gave me a lot of time to really reflect on the gift of fertility and what a beautiful process that was, and to really be able to thank God for it. And so in those last 5 years, like Julianne was born, I think I was 44, my last child. And, I still took a few pregnancy tests in those years. We were not actually necessarily avoiding all the time because we were more open actually than we'd ever been before. We never did conceive though. Mm-hmm. And I just kind of became more open to what God wanted for us. And I guess that's the beauty of really living fertility appreciation as the Creighton model is taught. The method it's through the interpersonal educational dynamic between the teacher and the couple, but the couple in the language that is used, it really teaches fertility appreciation. And I really see that in my own journey with it. After charting all those years, I really was not, the grieving that I went through, I realized, wow, I really did appreciate this fertility. Mm-hmm. There were times when I didn't, we were not really trying to conceive, or really not open to conceiving. I can say it that way. But as I got to the end of it, I realized, wow, this really has been a beautiful part of my life. And I'm so grateful that I had this experience. And I really do appreciate the gift of fertility. Mm-hmm. And then one other thing, so I'm not sure if I'm answering the question.
You are
sideways on that, but I think that there were times that we knew that it wasn't a good time to conceive, and I think that's normal in a married couple's life. There's times when there's a lot of stress, and there can be maybe a financial strain or a cross of some kind, and so consciously. We would discuss our intentions and know that, this isn't the best time. Sometimes I would be more open and my husband would not be, or sometimes he would be more open and I would not be. And we would have to pray about that. And with actually Julianne, and this is a good example I can share because John Paul was my 5th child and he was about 4 and he went through this time. It was a long time, like maybe 18 months of night terrors. I think that's what they were.
Yeah.
And so every night we were up like once or twice at night. It was almost like having a newborn.
Mm-hmm.
Up and down, up and down. And so the sleep deprivation was real.
Right.
And anyway, we eventually had Michael, but there's a little more space in between those two because of that. And then Michael was born, and then I had an unexpected pregnancy. I had 8 pregnancies, and only one was not expected. And the one that was unexpected was actually I had a miscarriage, and that was in between Michael and Julianne. And so I had gotten through that. We'd gotten through all that with them. I could see on my chart that my fertility really wasn't nearly as healthy as it used to be, and had the miscarriage. I got through that process. I mean, that was fine. I mean, we accept it's a little gift that God gave us that we didn't expect, and now we have a soul, right? But we don't have the baby. But we got through that, experienced all those emotions. But I had healed from it, and we were moving on. And my husband went on a retreat, and he had just gotten back to his normal sleeping, and I didn't hear him complaining about anything. And I just knew he was not really ready for another. He didn't want it. I could tell actually he felt like his family size was complete. And I was, I was a little sad about that, but I accepted it. But he went on a retreat, a boys' retreat. And anyway, I don't know. He was talking to some dads, and one of the dads had just had another baby. And he comes home from this retreat and he says, I think we need to have another baby. And I thought he had two heads. I mean, I just was like, I was 43 and I was just, we'd already gone through all this, and I'm thinking, you said, you think we should have another I really had to pray. So that was the time. And I had just done that consecration to the Blessed Mother, and had done the consecration on May 13th. And so I prayed that whole summer. And I was asking the Blessed Mother, I really was praying, putting it in her hands. I really had to pray, because I was like, I just don't know. I had I think I was a little fearful because of the miscarriage, and it had taken us a year to conceive Michael. So I just knew that my fertility really wasn't like it used to be. And so at the end of the 3 months, it was like August, I finally came and I said, all right, we can, let's see. I don't know if it's going to happen. I told him, I said, I don't know, but we'll try, because it's taken us at least a year to have Michael. First cycle we tried, we conceived, and we had Julianne.
Oh my gosh.
So every time I look at her, I just think, wow, I prayed for this baby, right? Because I really did. Those 3 months of just, discerning about it, until the Lord, was able to open my heart, and I was able to really trust. And what a gift she is. So, not all my kids are gifts, but you appreciate it more as you get older. You really appreciate the true miracle of it all.
Right. I've heard it throughout this last hour of you sharing. I feel like your story is such a great explanation for those who maybe don't know what prayer is. That prayer is not us trying to change God's mind, but giving God the opportunity to change our hearts. Because that's what I hear. Debbie is like, I don't know how I feel about that. I'm going to pray about it. And then you feel differently after prayer. And I think it's so powerful, and especially a prayer like being in front of the Blessed Sacrament in Eucharistic adoration, and just being in the presence of God and just letting God do the work. I think that's something that I forget often, is that just making myself available to the best of my ability, and then allowing God's grace to change. Because I think where most people that I've heard them share any type of conversion experience, any, teaching, any concept of God, anything that is found challenging, instead of, if I don't run away from it and I try to just question, pursue, what is this here? What is this? And in that pursuit, that in itself is kind of making myself open to a possibility of a different answer, of something new, of God to change me, but that can be, and then I think sometimes when that though, then that can also be scary. It's like, but I don't really want you to change me or this, right? Like, I really like what I'm doing or what I'm thinking. And maybe, if you don't mind, too, another part of your story that I find to be so beautiful, which I know isn't directly related to natural family planning, but it is related to your marriage. And I think your witness in you and Gregor and your mutual submission to one another in your married life, from how you went from working in a practice, and you had Lauren, right, when you were working?
I did, yeah.
Just Lauren?
Actually, I was pregnant with Claire when I decided to take some time off. Well, that's a whole nother discussion about that. Right. Like I said, conversion is lifelong, and it's going to be up and down. Right. Once you make that decision to listen to God, you just watch out.
He keeps talking to you. Yeah. Yeah. He doesn't want to stop talking.
But yeah. So I had 3 kids while I was working.
Okay. And then you ended up leaving your practice full time.
I did. Yeah. So I stayed home for 2 years, and then discerned, and that was one of the hardest decisions actually I think I've ever made. But very fruitful. And again, God was there with me, and so many people around me supporting me. But yeah, I took some time off, 2 years, to just really be home with my kids and kind of be a mom to them. And then was able to, through prayer, discern about starting the St. Gianna Center, which is a nonprofit in Largo. Well, actually, it's in Gulfport now. We just moved. But we do teach the Creighton model there. And I was providing medical care for any patients that needed it through the center. And that's a whole nother story, how that kind of happened. I was doing that very part-time, initially just like, 1/2 day a month, then 2.5 days a month. And then by 2018, it had gotten very busy. So kind of gradually, I was just doing it kind of on the side, but mostly still being home.
Right. Okay. So, we have to have like a Debbie part 2 now, but, I guess to finish this up, maybe you can, just end with a little bit about, the Creighton model fertility care system itself and, who it can benefit and, what it offers people, couples, medical professionals. I know you touched a little bit on that. And then any last minute things or I guess like one last thing you'd love to share with people who are listening, who are in that spot of discomfort of hearing this message, not feeling comfortable with it, not having that, not having peace with it, but also not having peace with ignoring it, that restless state. Maybe just, end with those things.
So Creighton model is a modern method of natural family planning. We use, we call it a fertility care method because it's basically teaching couples to understand their fertility and to take care of it and to appreciate it. It helps to identify the fertile window each cycle, and then the couple can either use that knowledge to achieve pregnancy, they use a fertile day for intercourse, or to avoid pregnancy if they want to just use, selectively have intercourse just on days that are identified as infertile. So it's a true method of natural family planning, just like a lot of there's other ones out there, many others, in that it allows you to either achieve or to avoid pregnancy. And the decision is left really up to the couple's discernment. It's ovulation method, so it's tracking cervical mucus. So the teacher works one-on-one with the couple and helps the woman to identify the mucus and the characteristics of the mucus, and then she puts that down on her chart in a standardized way. The charting is standardized, so I, as a physician, went through some training. A physician who's trained to read the chart can actually look at the charts and determine. Look at the charts have what we call biomarkers on them, so they give you certain. There's a lot of information I look at when I'm looking at a Creighton chart that can tell me about the health of that woman's fertility. And so if the woman's experiencing a medical issue, you can use that charting to diagnose and treat whatever problem she's having. So I use that a lot in my Creighton model fertility care practice. So that's the Creighton model. And then the second question was about if someone is having difficulty. Okay, so I think if you're actually even listening to this podcast, it means you're open in some way, right, to the truth about the church's teaching on human sexuality. And it's a beautiful truth. So I would say my recommendation is that, as my life has shown, God is so merciful and he's so patient with us. And so sometimes it takes us a while to see the truth. And I just encourage people, even if you're uncomfortable, not to just shut down and just just to get out of the discomfort, just to move on and not think about it more. Usually it means you need to go deeper, and it can take a while to do that. It took me at least 3 months to read through. For some people it's right away. Some maybe it takes longer, but just allow God to work on you. Just have that openness of heart. I think that's the most important thing, is to work on openness of heart and prayer. And spend time in adoration and find some mentors. I think that was really helpful for me too, just having other physicians and other people that could kind of, walk with me on that journey. And God will lead you. He'll lead you to the truth. If you ask enough questions and you stick with it long enough, that peace will come and you'll know the truth. When I received the Eucharist, this was a light I had this Advent. The Immaculate Conception, or actually the Annunciation. So I was thinking about that and Mary receiving Jesus. And when I go to receive the Eucharist, I have the light that when we go to receive the Eucharist, when we receive Jesus in us, it's like Mary in a sense. We can't ever be like pure as Mary, or as humble as Mary, as open as Mary, but we can try to be, right? As we're receiving Jesus in the Eucharist, we receive Jesus just like Mary received Jesus from the Holy Spirit. And then we can say to God, I am all yours. Like Pope John Paul II would say, totus tuus, and his motto is, I am all yours. And then I say, I am all yours. And whatever you're going to do, I'm all yours. And then you just have to trust. And then God will lead you where he wants you to go.
Thank you so much, Debbie, for sharing with us. What a wonderful story. Thank you all for being with us again this week, and we'll see you next time. Bye. That wraps up another episode of the NFP Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us today. We hope you found our discussion enlightening and empowering. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. We'd love to hear from you. Please connect with us by sending us an email with your questions and stories to thenfpshow@gmail.com. We'll be back next week with more insights, tips, and heartfelt conversations about natural family planning. Until then, love responsibly.